Hello everyone, thank you for joining me for another TLDR video. I am your host Voodoo Pickles, and today we're going to be talking about The Fisherman. So this was written by John Langan, and I read it through an audiobook. So it was narrated by Danny Campbell, and this book takes place in upstate New York. And it follows Abe and Dan. Abe and Dan are both widowers for completely different things happen to them, but they're both widowers, and they are on their way to go fishing. When Abe first became a widow, he needed something to distract him, and he found that fishing distracted him and brought him some joy. So when Dan became a widow, they decided to go fishing together. And Dan tells him that he found a journal of sorts that his grandfather kept of fishing spots around the area. So they should try and go fishing at one of these areas. They head towards the map, the area on the map where it says this river/lake should be, and they end up stopping at a local diner in that area. And while they stop there, the chef asks them where they're going, where they're going to be fishing. It is raining a lot, and he's like, there's going to be flooding. I think it's a bad idea. But they're like, no, we're going to go. Dan is very adamant that they're going to be going there, even though Abe's like, maybe we should just not. But Dan is just like, no, we're going to go. So the chef ends up telling them a story about the lake that they're trying to go to after he found out where it is. He tried to talk him out of going there. It wouldn't work. So he's like, I need you to know what you're getting into. And the backstory of this lake that they're trying to head to is there was a temporary village while they build a dam to build this lake. And during this temporary village, a lot of the workers, there was a lot of weird things that started to happen. One of the weirdest things that happened was a wife that was trampled to death in a stampede came back. After they had her funeral and everything, she came back. And her husband was overjoyed. Her children were overjoyed, except she started acting weird. And then she started trying to get to her children, and she tried to unalive her children. And her children were saved by the neighbors, and this temporary village is filled with a lot of like migrant workers, a lot of minorities in this time, this is back late 1800s, early 1900s time frame. And so it was a lot of like migrant workers, a lot of minorities, a lot of people that couldn't get jobs in the larger cities. And one of these was a man who traveled with his family from Germany, who was a professor in Germany but became disgraced and then fired from his position, and they had to travel to the United States to try and live. And so this wife comes back. She tries to unalive her children, and the whole village is up in arms about what to do. They're trying to figure out what to do. They don't really know how to proceed with this. A lot of them don't even speak the same language fluently. And the German professor is trying to help them. Nobody of the higher authorities is listening to them. Nobody's trying to help them or anything. And this professor was disgraced because he was working to learn more occult practices. And he was going to be a part of this secret society in Germany that practiced occult things, except that he was sent out on a test with this other man who was another candidate to be brought into this secret society. That man died, and they blamed it on him, and everybody shunned him when that happened. And so he goes through his old books that he brought with him, and he performs a spell on this woman that came back from the dead. And he puts a spell on the house and banishes her. And then he figures out what he has to do is that there is somebody controlling her. He said that is not the wife. The wife kills the husband that was still there. They realize that wasn't actually his wife. So the German professor gets a group together of like a little posse of people who are going to be going with him to confront the thing that brought that woman back to life. And he's pursuing this more because there's a spell that is put on his daughter, and so he needs to kind of fight this evil thing to get his daughter back. This evil thing is called the Fisherman. The Fisherman is ageless, and we get history on the Fisherman, on where he came from, a little bit more and how long he's been there. And it's all interwoven into the chef's story about this history of this lake. So the German professor goes with this group of men. They go to confront the fisherman, and the fisherman is trying to catch a leviathan. And when he catches this leviathan, he can take its power from it and be able to do whatever he wants. And he is very excited about this. He's very close to it. The German professor and the other men disrupt what he is doing and try and cut the leviathan free. And they end up disrupting him. The German professor gets into a fight with the fisherman, ends up throwing him into the lake with the leviathan, and they're just trying to disrupt his ritual as much as they can, hopefully enough to stop it. Except the German professor tells him, he's like, this will never be enough to stop it. He's like, do you see these anchors? Oops. They're in kind of a different dimension. And he's like, do you see these anchors? And there's hundreds of them. He says by the time they destroy all of them, they may not have a family to go back to. So they're going to destroy as much as they can and then just leave. And then hopefully the next time the fisherman is ready to come back, somebody else will be able to do this. And so they do that. They leave and they just kind of live their life that way. So the chef tells them this story, and the daughter that a spell was put on was an actual person in the village that was in the town over. And she told this story to a priest, and that's how the kind of got out. And Abe and Dan are like, Abe's like, hey, we shouldn't go. And Dan's like, no, we are definitely going. When they get out to where the lake should be, Dan tells him, because Abe is like pulling on him and telling him, I will not go further and I will not let you go further until you tell me what the hell is going on. Dan tells him that the journal that his grandfather had for fishing spots and areas like that tells of a time he went fishing in this area and he saw his wife, who had been dead for 5 years, and he got to spend a day with her. And he was really happy about that and everything. And so Dan wants to see his wife again. He wants to see his family, so that's why he wants to go there. And he wants Abe to go there, and he's using the thought of seeing his wife again as like a carrot on a stick. And so they go there. They get into a confrontation when after Abe catches this thing that's not really a fish. Kind of looks like an anglerfish, but it's got a human head on it. And they get into a fight, and Dan starts walking up the river. And while they're doing that, Abe sees his wife across the river. So he jumps in and swims across to try and get to her. He gets to her, they hug, they kiss, they miss each other so much, they end up having sex. And after that, post-nut clarity for Abe, he realizes that this thing does not really look like his wife. Like, it looks like his wife, but it's not acting like his wife, not really talking like his wife. So he threatens the thing to drop the whole facade. It does, and it's this giant fish covered in skin looking thing, and he is disgusted. He starts to throw up, and he tells the thing to take him to Dan. The thing tells him that, all right, I'll take you to Dan. And they end up traveling into the forest. He tells them, like, this is not where Dan was going. The thing's like, I'll take you to Dan. He's not over there. He's over here now. So they end up traveling for what seems like weeks and weeks and weeks, except time is not a concept here. They meet little things off to the side, and there's little explanations of what's going on. And they end up getting to where Dan is. Dan is sitting on a beach. There's this giant, like, tree stump. And at the foot of this tree stump area is where Dan is. And he's sitting with his wife and his 2 children that had passed a year before. And he's sitting there. He's super happy. He's super excited. He's telling Abe, did you see your wife? Isn't this so great? This is so amazing. Abe looks around and he sees the children. He sees some more of these fish things off in the distance. And he sees that there is a man covered in barnacles. and looking a little zombified, that is holding on to chains and is also chained to this tree trunk. And he's staring off into the distance. And when Abe looks, he sees something very giant, very spiky, very terrifying, off into the distance, looking like it's trying to break out of something. And Dan is telling him that this is the fisherman, and the fisherman needs our strength, and we need to surrender our strength to the fisherman so he can give us our family back. And he can get his family back by catching the Leviathan. Abe is just like, this is super sus. I don't believe this is real. I don't want to do this. And Dan is telling him, you have to do it. He won't take just my strength, and he needs yours as well. Abe tells him no. When he tells him no, Dan's wife and children turn on Dan, and they eat him. And when they eat him, Abe takes off and he runs. He's trying to fight them off. He kind of he loses a little bit, and he just runs off. And he continues to run back to the way where that fish person kind of showed him where to go of when they were trying to find Dan. He ends up going back to the river. The fish person that was his wife jumps on him. They fall into the river, and he ends up cutting the fish person, and it lets him go. And he is found a day later after search and rescue teams are out and about because there was a huge storm that happened. It was the worst flooding that they've seen in the area. And they ask him what happened. And he's like, I don't know what happened, even though he was telling them exactly what happened when he was a little delirious. And so it cuts to a few years later. Abe is feeling a little bit better. He's feeling that he's removed from it. He's kind of being like, all right, this was back then. It's not really real. It's fine. And he has new neighbors. He's starting to fish again. He's not scared of the water as much. And he's just kind of living his life. And then another flood storm happens. They're preparing people for floods. They're telling him it's going to be really bad. Except he's like, I'm not going anywhere. It's fine. I got this. And his house is flooded, and when around his house gets flooded, he sees Dan. Dan is there, naked, and blaming his death on Abe. Abe tells him it was his own damn fault. He told him not to do it, and uses a spray paint can that he has next to him and a lighter and sets Dan on fire. Dan runs out, jumps into the water, and disappears. And Abe looks around and he starts hearing things trying to get into his house. So he freaks out. He locks the doors. He goes over. He grabs a knife, grabs a lighter and another can of spray paint, and he goes to hide. The next morning, they're search and rescue again, and he's just like, yes, please take me away. Please take me away, take me to somewhere safe, take me where there's no water. And as he's leaving in the boat with the police, he looks down and he sees rows and rows of these fish people. And they all have human faces on them. And he focuses on one that looks like his wife. And there's two smaller little fish people besides the one that looks like his wife. And they look a little like him. And that's where the story ends. So is this a totes or nope? I gave this 4.5 stars. I think it was a definite totes for me. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the Lovecraftian theme of it. I enjoyed the whole history of this town and all of these little things that we don't get more information on, but you kind of get a gist of it. It was a really long book and it had a lot of information into it, but I think it was definitely worth it. And I love fishing, so that's originally why I picked up the book. Because I was just like, I love fishing, and this book's called The Fisherman. And I was not aware of the Lovecraftian whole things and the fishermen and the Leviathans and everything. So that was a very pleasant surprise, but I think it's a definite totes. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you have an amazing day, night, afternoon, whatever it is where you are. And if you want to pick up this book, I will have the link down below for using your local library to borrow it, to get it secondhand, or to buy it new from your local bookstore. All of that will be below. Also the links for all my socials, so you can come and hang out with me and vote on books I should read. We can talk about books, we can talk about movies, whatever. We're just chilling on my socials. And I will also put the link for the long form review of this book as well. Whenever I get to recording it and putting it up, the link will also be down below. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Don't forget to do all the YouTube things, like, subscribe, all of that, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.